So we can just dive right in.
Yeah, sure.
And during the show's holiday break, China commemorated what would be the 130th birthday of the historical revolutionary Mao Zedong. But could you give our listeners a brief summary of Mao's tenure, his legacy that he left behind, and then quickly talk about Mao's influence over Xi and the CCP leadership today?
Well, Mao was the longtime dictator of China. He ruled China from 1949 until 1976 when he died. He had this indelible impact on the history of modern China. He was the guy who basically, established the Chinese People's Republic as a totalitarian Chinese communist regime, and basically followed the blueprint of the orthodox Marxist-Leninism to reshape China in a very fundamental way. Not only changed China's economic foundation, but most importantly, the Chinese political structure, its social fabric, and so wreaked havoc on the society. I mean, during the peacetime of Mao's rule, an estimated 70 to 80 million Chinese perished as a result of his disastrous program and pogroms in China. So this is such a tragic figure in history, yet the Chinese Communist Party has never abandoned Mao as its founder, as its ideological source of government guidance. Today, Mao's body is still entombed in the nerve center of Chinese politics in Tiananmen Square. His portrait is still hanging in the Tiananmen Gate. So Xi Jinping wants to sort of carry on Mao's legacy and to rebrand him as the heir to Mao's thoughts and Mao's policy. That's why he basically, conducted this very lavish celebration of Mao's 130th birthday, December 26th of 2023.
Do people hold Mao to a higher esteem than Xi, or does Xi have any ego issues with that? Or
yes, because Mao was such an impactful figure in history, Xi Jinping wanted to be the most impactful Chinese Communist leader after Mao. So what he's trying to do is that he tried to basically, to downgrade the role played by his predecessors after Mao, Deng Xiaoping, Jiang Zemin, Hu Jintao. He's no longer happy to be designated as the fifth generation CCP leader. He wants to be the second generation CCP leader directly after Mao. So in other words, he would basically make the contribution to the Chinese economic development under his predecessor disappear.
Finally, Mao's on that. In what way is Xi trying to revive Mao's legacy or his causes, his ideas today?
Well, to Xi Jinping, Mao Zedong represented not just a era of Chinese history that he wants to imitate, but also the Mao thoughts. Xi Jinping fancies himself as a philosopher, as the ideological innovator of Marxism-Leninism. Therefore, he wants to promote Mao as an ideological giant. By virtue of doing that, he's trying to promote himself. So all the major characteristics of Mao are being replicated and imitated by Xi Jinping now in China. For example, Mao's era was marked by this intense personality cult. Mao was regarded as a semigod, as infallible. So this is exactly what Xi Jinping is doing inside China. He's launching a whole of society communist indoctrination to build Xi Jinping himself as a great leader of incredible ideological and philosophical thoughts. He also demanded, like Mao, absolute loyalty of the entire Chinese Communist Party infrastructure and bureaucracy to the supreme leader himself. Last week, for example, the Chinese Communist Party's Politburo had a meeting. The primary purpose of that meeting is to how to implement nationwide Study Xi Jinping Thoughts campaign. Guess who presided over that meeting? Well, Xi Jinping himself. So he basically presided the Politburo meeting to implement how to study his own thoughts. This is kind of a little bit like, bizarre and absurd. He also, like Mao, tried to centralize all military and civilian command powers into his own hands. Xi Jinping is widely known as the chairman of everything, and that's exactly what he is. But the hallmark of Xi Jinping's restoration of Mao rule is the redefinition of political control and economic development. The era between Mao's death in 1976 and Xi Jinping's rise to supremacy in 2012 is marked by CCP's strict control of political power while focusing on economic development. Now, Xi Jinping said, no, that's not correct. I'm going to have the CCP represented by myself to control not only political power, but also economic power as well, by systematically destroying non-state economic sectors and massively reduce China's economic and financial reliance on the West, especially the United States. So he wants going back to Mao era of self-reliance. So to this end, we can see in recent months, Xi Jinping has drastically reduced China's share of U.S. debt, for example, from China's share of treasury holding just like a year or two ago of $1.2 trillion to under $800 billion today. And that tendency is continuing right now. You also may recall Xi Jinping has ordered withdrawal of some key Chinese companies listing in U.S. capital markets, particularly the New York Stock Exchange. Xi Jinping also took control of all major companies and corporations inside China, including the e-commerce behemoth Alibaba and Tencent, virtually nationalized the world's largest third-party e-payment system, Alipay. Now, Alipay is very important. Alipay is a giant third-party payment system. It has 1.3 billion users in China and abroad. Something like 800 million Chinese companies using Alipay. In the United States, you have also several million users using this Alipay. You go to CVS, for example. The CVS has an Alipay system. They accept Alipay. Alipay is much bigger than PayPal right now. So essentially, the Communist Party nationalized this because last week, the Chinese People's Bank suddenly announced Alipay eventually has no owner. That means nobody can claim to be the owner of Alipay, meaning that the government is now the actual owner of that. So many founders and CEOs of leading non-state businesses and corporations are in jail or persecuted or chased out of China. So this is a very, very serious thing about Xi Jinping. That's why Mao era is coming back. And also, Xi Jinping has created a condition in China that chased out foreign investments, foreign companies, make foreign companies impossible to operate inside China. As a result of that, China's foreign direct investment has become virtually negative. One of the largest capital flights in human history is happening we can see from China. In other words, foreign capital is moving out of China. And China is basically a place that is uninvestable. All of this points to one end, that Xi Jinping wants to be Mao's direct ideological heir, writing off 5 decades of post-Mao economic engagement with the West. To him, he's not a 5th generation leader, as I said earlier. He's a 2nd generation of a correct CCP leader immediately after Mao. The only difference now, I have to point out, is that between Mao's China and Xi's China is that today's China is economically, technologically, and militarily much more powerful, making the CCP's perpetual obsession with global domination a much more imminent and imminent threat than Mao's China.
Yeah, that's great. I want to stay with Xi again in transitioning to our second topic. Actually, during his New Year's address on Sunday, he made numerous remarks about the strength of the Russia-China relationship and said, I'll quote, "Under our joint leadership, political mutual trust between the two sides has further deepened, strategic coordination has drawn closer, and mutually beneficial cooperation has continued to achieve new results, not redundant at all." He topped it off by declaring that building close relationship with Russia was a, quote, strategic choice, which sounds like intentional and strategic word choice. So with 2024 upon us, what can we expect from the Russia-China nexus this year in terms of their role with the Ukraine conflict, but similarly Gaza? Is it going to be more of the same? Should we expect deeper involvement? Set it up for us. We can start with Ukraine and then we can move to Gaza as well.
Yeah, that's a very good point. 22 months into the war in Ukraine, Russia is stuck. You might say Ukraine has become Russia's quagmire. So for China, the stake is even higher because the United States has shifted its strategic focus away from Europe. away from the Middle East to focus on China in the Indo-Pacific.
Yeah.
And that's basically what this country has been doing. And China is not very happy about that. So for China, strategically, it's very important to create strategic distractions somewhere else other than China. So the strategic distraction right now, the two most biggest ones are in Europe, the war in Ukraine, and the Hamas war against Israel in the Middle East. That's why China has done its utmost to beef up China's involvement in the war in Ukraine and Hamas war in the Middle East. Now, China has to do this very carefully because China has been warned severely by the Western leaders. So what China has done is, let's just say Russia's war in Ukraine. China has devoted to creating and sustaining a strategic distraction to U.S. in Ukraine. In the Russia case, China has not given Russia critical weapons directly, but China has supported the Russia's war economy in a very big way. There has been the inflow of Chinese shipment of huge dual-use equipment. And I'll give you some specific numbers. Since the beginning of the Ukrainian war, China has become the biggest supplier of transportation and infrastructure equipment, including railway cars, automobiles, trucks, aircraft, and ships, by a staggering 800%. This is reported in the recent study. More blatantly, what Russia needs and China has is high-end modern warfare technology. So China has given Russia in the last 2 years a huge number of high-end advanced machine tools critical for Russia's war in Ukraine. Last week, Financial Times reported, and I quote, Chinese shipments to Russia of important class of advanced machine tools have increased tenfold since the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, with the country's producers now dominating trade in high-precision computer numerical control devices, vital to Moscow's military industries, unquote. So as I said repeatedly on this podcast and in other programs, that China has become the arsenal of autocracy. And this is just another example. It's no exaggeration.
Let's go to Gaza too, in setting up kind of the year in 2024. What does Chinese involvement in Gaza look like? Is it deeper? Do they kind of keep it at a distance?
As I said earlier, I mean, China would be glad to see U.S. be dragged into another quagmire in the Middle East and engendered by the Gaza conflict. Since the Gaza war started on October 7th of 2023, China has been decisively on the side of Hamas. China has refused, despite repeated urging by Israel and other countries, refused to criticize, let alone condemn Hamas's atrocities on Israelis. Anti-Semitism is rising inside China, with many vile attacks on Israel unchecked and encouraged. Now, we all know the country that is heavily involved in this Middle East fight is Iran. Now, China may not have been directly shipped weapons to the fight in Gaza, but China has been a major financial backer of Iran. China has signed a $400 billion deal with Iran 2 years ago, so indirectly helping the Hamas through Iranians. There are, however, Chinese-made weapons used by Hamas, but those sources were not confirmed because it's very difficult to ascertain whether they're directly shipped from China or not. Structurally, though, if you look at the Hamas, their operational ethos, their operational principles, almost like the Chinese Communist Party. Hamas, at the top of Hamas leadership, is something called the Politburo. Literally, it's called Politburo. Last week, the number 2 of the Hamas Politburo was killed by the Israeli fight. Also, under the Politburo, you have the government structure is very peculiar because it has a very powerful global outreach program focused on global Palestinian diaspora communities worldwide. This is strikingly similar to the CCP's United Front work.
Yeah.
Using its proxies on foreign campuses and in major think tanks, even foreign government bodies, especially legislatures, such as some of the voices inside the U.S. Congress and the U.K. Parliament. So you might say Hamas basically, got inspired by the Chinese Communist Party in a very major way.
I hadn't put those together before. Yeah, that's interesting. And for our last topic today, we're looking at a leadership shakeup in the PLA. A former Navy chief, Deng Jun, was named the new defense minister last week. His predecessor had suddenly disappeared from public view about 4 months ago, as people who fly too close to the CCP sun often do. Miles, what do we know about this new choice of minister? And is it significant that he specifically has a naval background? I mean, China is beefing up its navy to huge sizes and looking at a naval-led operation in Taiwan if they do make that move. Is this defense minister inextricably linked to Xi's military strategy going forward? Am I reading too much into that?
Well, the Chinese leadership operation is as the Chinese always say, it's operated in a black box.
Right.
So nobody knows exactly what happened. But there's some telltale signs that you can give us some kind of a thing. Now, the new defense minister, replacing the previous defense minister, who's the army general, his name is Li Shangfu. He disappeared. The non-person, nobody knows where he is. He may be dead, he may be alive, maybe detained. So this new admiral as the new defense minister, his name is Dong Jun. He's coming out of nowhere. If you understand Chinese politics, you might say, hey, listen, this is basically a strategic shift from the land army-dominated ethos of the military operation to sort of a naval amphibious leadership. That's basically is the nature of the, for example, the Taiwan campaign, right? But maybe, if you understand the Chinese dictatorship logic, you might just say, hey, listen, that's an overreading of the Chinese military move. Dong Jun is nobody. Nobody knows where he's not real. He's a surprise choice. However, if you understand Chinese language,
go ahead. He's got an interesting name.
Yeah. His name is Dong Jun. Literally means phonetically can be translated as someone who understands the military.
Well, there you go. There's
so
the
maybe
choice.
There's some very casual, haphazard decision made by Xi Jinping. Say, this name sounds very interesting. Therefore, I chose him. Dictatorship logic is very, very peculiar. I think this kind of similar leadership choices have happened in the past. Let's just be a little bit more serious about this leadership change in the military. There's long been rumors about the sacking of senior leadership in the military. The entire Chinese strategic rocket force are gone, but unconfirmed. And then the Chinese defense minister simply disappeared. So, but now, last week, the Chinese government officially announced the sacking of the 9 senior PLA officers, including 3-4 generals and several lieutenant general and major generals. And the entire leadership of Chinese rocket force were purged. And they officially, we got a new defense minister who is the first ever naval admiral. The reason is that Xi Jinping is a diehard Marxist. To him, purging and sacking disloyal and bad elements at any level of the Chinese Communist regime is a necessary self-cleansing and purifying act, only making the party and the supreme leader stronger and more virile. So to him, getting rid of the bad, the weak, and the disloyal is actually a good thing, making Xi more dangerous and prone to misjudgment and miscalculation about China's real strength and weaknesses. In reality, however, massive purges also create the demoralized effect upon the rank and file of PLA officers and soldiers, deepens the schism between the ubiquitous and powerful political commissars and the professional commanders. So I'm not sure these purges will really work towards Xi Jinping's advantage, because it will definitely reduce the PLA's fighting capabilities.
万事不求人，私人助理、私人顾问时代来临了。六度万事，万事相助，超强博士群不断奉献专项服务，信息、财经、健康、文娱、教育、旅游、消费、科技、美食，让您的生活品质全线升级。六度世界现在体验，请去3W.6度.WORLD。
限时免费期间，全体注册网友免费使用付费版的高级功能如下：支持论坛搜索，免费画图。第一步，点击右上角最左边的机器人符号开始对话，像图片中红框中的那样。第二步，如图选择6度万事，我们未来将推出更多的 AI 供大家选择。然后就可以与六博士悄悄畅谈了。还支持论坛内部信息搜索哦。您还可以让六博士做你的助手，帮你绘制漂亮图片。最后可以点击添加好友进来，一起与六博士工作。一起来 3w.6度.world 尝试吧。